Hello, I'm Ronnie Eldridge. Welcome to Eldridge & Company. The thousands of small nonprofit neighborhood groups that try to improve lives and find opportunities for their communities often need help themselves. 30 years ago, Fran Barrett founded something called the Community Resource Exchange. It's a nonprofit social change consulting firm that does just that. Welcome. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you, Ronnie.
It's a brilliant idea. How did you get that idea?
It grew organically, I'd say. When I first came to New York, I lived for many years in Brownsville, which was a community at that time which was in great need. And what I saw there was the incredible potential of the community itself, and the idea that community organizations are really sort of the leverage point for everything good that happens in New York, or for much of what is good that happens in New York. It just occurred to me then that community organizations are sort of the major leverage points for us, all of us looking for a better society.
You mean, when you say leverage points, you mean they're the closest to people
closest
and the best way to get something
done.
Done.
Right, exactly. And so it occurred to me after some years of working on the front lines in, organizing and doing other things, that I knew a whole lot of organizations who could help each other, who knew things that they would mutually benefit from. So I spent about 2 years creating a kind of what would now be probably a web page, but in those days was a directory. And these 50 organizations, worked with me, and I interviewed them, and I found out that one person is really good at human resources stuff, and another person is really good at federal grantsmanship. And when it all was done, I thought, okay, this is great. Now they can all just help each other. All they need to do is look it up in the book. And they said, oh, no, you don't. This is all well and good, but we need somebody to be the sort of interface between us. And so CRE was really born out of that idea. And that's why we're called a Community Resource Exchange,
it's a great
because
name.
we learn from organizations and we bring the information that we've learned to other organizations.
So now, currently, you're helping how many organizations?
Well, we work last year with about 300 organizations, and another 500 individual people came through our workshops and training sessions and leadership centers. So a fair number of New York community organizations are involved with CRE now, and in the more current way of talking about these things, we now have a fair amount of knowledge stored up from other organizations. And so also we've got a very accomplished sort of consulting staff of 30 people, and it is.
So it's like a regular. So you're a management consultant who doesn't make a lot of money,
right? Well, there's that. Yes, we don't make a lot of money,
and nor do your staff or the other consultants with you.
That's right.
What's the motivation for people working in nonprofit organizations?
The motivation, I can tell you what the motivation is at CRE. It's relevance. That doing work that matters is very, very hard to come by. And we try to pay a living wage. We try to be a great place to work. But we provide at CRE, I think, a great, I hope, a really great sort of community, interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary, intellectually different community, and also a culturally different community. So that when we have a client, all of us give our best thinking to that. And that isn't just, consulting firms are often based in the sort of thinking of MBAs and that training, and that's all well and good, but we like to mix in, one of our colleagues is an engineer, several of our colleagues are social workers. I mean, we like to look at things from a lot of different angles to see how do we come up with the best idea.
So it's basically people who have a sense of community and of the common good. And, that thing that some of us grew up with.
Yes.
That many people aren't, I think, these days. I don't know.
Well, yeah.
But you see it in a lot of communities.
We see it every day. We see the best of New York every day, and that's a very lucky thing. And we kind of, we get off on that. We get to find somebody great in Staten Island who's doing something no one else ever thought of doing, it's really a privilege when organizational leaders turn to us and say, I really want to do something in my community, whether that is to start an after-school program or help with, battering or whatever it is. We're just lucky that people turn to us and say, can you help us with that?
Do you find that there are more and more cultural groups doing that? I mean, with the
arts and
waves of immigration and different,
there are
so many different kinds of, so many different people living in this.
Right. I think the fact that there are so many new immigrant groups is really in response to the reality that there are so many new immigrants. And it's very, sort of consistent for them to band together to try to form something and to try to make something happen. And they do, in fact, provide a sort of portal for their own kind of neighbors and other immigrants to come to understand, something like entitlements or something like, the school system or something like, even the transportation system. So they are, an incredible kind of bridge for immigrants into the society at large in New York.
So we know, I mean, do people who go into this kind of work, both the local groups that you're talking about and the consultants, do they have a different kind of soul? I can't ever figure. I'm so interested in knowing what forms the inner part of somebody.
I think it may be. I don't know. It's an interesting question. I doubt that it's genetic, because I have 6 brothers and they're all construction workers. So something would have gone terribly awry with me. I think it has to do with what you're exposed to. I think the idea, of seeing a community work to see what's possible. Even if you don't see it in your own life, but you see it in another place, some aspiration. Some hope. I mean, we're consultants, and we know that the most important thing we bring, and we've got lots and lots of business skills, lots and lots of training, but what we bring is hope. We bring, you know what, it's not all over. We can figure this out.
This fulfilling somebody's dream. Right, but then the people who have the dream, I'm always excited when I speak to somebody who comes up with that kind of a dream rather than a marketing plan in a corporation. So it's a whole different approach, I guess, to life. Well, why are nonprofits so important in the city?
For a lot of reasons, and with the reasons we've just been talking about, in that they are sort of the filament that connects a lot of the city. They're also the second largest employment sector in the city. There are more people working in the nonprofit sector than work in finance, insurance, and real estate combined. And you know how much attention we have paid to those very important sectors.
We've even given them a name, fire industry.
Right. But the nonprofit sector is a huge employment sector and a sector that employs very often from local communities. Local nonprofits very often are the first hire for somebody in the community. And so this is a very valuable contribution. Forget about what they do. This is just a very valuable contribution that the nonprofit sector makes to New York. And this has been first and foremost documented by a professor here at CUNY, John Seeley, who did some of the original work looking at the nonprofit sector as an economic sector, as an employment sector.
It also provides services that the city isn't prepared or doesn't do.
Right.
It's also got a lot of things that are outsourced to nonprofits, right?
I think,
I just had to use that term, I'm sorry.
The one that comes to my mind is privatization.
Yeah.
But the idea that some things that city government is not prepared to do or staffed to do, and yet city government or state government sees it has to happen, that's very, then it's very common for the nonprofits, for the city to subcontract out to the nonprofits a good bit of service. I mean, an overwhelming amount of the money that flows into the nonprofits flows from city and state budgets. So obviously, budget cuts are a very scary thing for the nonprofit sector, as they are for everybody, but particularly us.
And do you know what's happening in the state?
Right now, no.
Or even the federal government now?
No. I mean, the Feds had, there was some freeze action today. We don't know what that would happen, but everything's intertwined. Like if there's a freeze on, say, reimbursements for Medicaid, or I guess Medicaid would be the one, then that affects all the agencies that are doing mental health and other types of services that are reimbursed on an individual basis. So it's a very tough business, and I think along those lines we have some really brilliant managers of nonprofits. I mean, I think that many of the people who work in the for-profit sector would agree if they knew that they simply couldn't do what we do because we're presented with an impossible task. Okay, there's 40 families here who are being displaced, or 50 young people whose school is being closed, and they were tied very much to a particular after-school program. And how is that? And there's very little infrastructure, and so and there's very little money in the best of times.
So they have to have great initiative,
yeah,
right?
They have to be
imagination,
very
creative,
right.
resiliency,
Yeah.
everything, flexibility.
Right. A sense of humor helps.
Yeah.
So
I'm always amazed, I mean, from working in the government, with people who worked in the government, they always wanted to be tested in the private sector. I assume there are some people in the nonprofit who feel the same way, that you don't really make it until you're in the private sector.
I
Maybe not.
Yeah, I don't know that the people in the nonprofit sector feel that way, but I remember one time sitting next to somebody at a dinner, a corporate executive, who said to me that he thought I could get a real job. So, I think it is
That's
sort
so
of
incredible. What did you say?
I just laughed. So, but, the reality is that we don't have enough coming together of the two sectors. We don't have a great understanding of each other. But increasingly, the next generation of leaders, I think, are looking to do something that combines the ability to make a living and the ability to do social enterprise.
So are we touching souls, more souls, do you think?
Souls are touched. I'm hoping that it's not, in the concept of a simple answer, like if somebody from the corporate sector just comes and whips us into shape, we'll be fine. I think there has to be some lessons learned from the experience that they've had in the last couple of years. But I do see, if you look at the graduate school enrollments in nonprofit management and at the Columbia School of Social Enterprise under Ray Horton's work, you see enormous growth and enormous interest from the part of on the part of young
students and people.
Yeah, and the graduates. And so, I don't know about you, but I could be doing nothing but informational interviews all day long because so many young people are interested in the sector. The question, one of the things that I observe, I don't really have a big answer about this, is that there's really no way into the sector. You kind of have to know someone or
to get into a nonprofit. You really?
There's no one portal. There's no one way to say, okay, there's no one place that you can go and see the whole sector and say, oh, gee, this is for me. I want to be over there.
But a lot of the people in nonprofits range from very small to large, right? So a public hospital is a nonprofit.
Yes, exactly.
And what else? The school system.
Schools. Well, that's a public agency.
Right.
I think that, we do have. Even within the range at CRE, we have nonprofits with zero money, and we have nonprofits with operating budgets of $50 million.
Yeah.
The problem with the $50 million level organizations is it's a collection of government contracts more than it is any kind of corpus of money that they have on their own. So they have a million sort of requirements that they have to meet in order to deliver on all their contracts.
If they have government contracts, then they're direct services. Is that
mostly direct service? That's mostly what government does, and direct service
and
is
that's
of course
what you
the
call,
thing.
Is that what you call privatization? Except that this is to a nonprofit instead of a profit maker.
Yeah.
I mean, the immigration facilities are now privatized.
Yes.
They're profit making.
Well, some of them are, and that there's still hundreds of immigrant groups out there
that are trying to do.
The
other thing is that
immigration services.
The immigrant nonprofits, small, they become advocates also, which is very important in our system of government.
Yes. And there's a fair amount of awareness about the need to make a case in a more rigorous way than we have in the past. And so even the tiniest organization is looking for, how does it show results? How does it, demonstrate that it is fulfilling a very important need?
So is that a technique from a corporation to a...
Yeah, I think we've been really adept at bringing things in from the corporate sector that work for us and using them. And I would argue that in New York, we probably have one of the most sophisticated nonprofit service centers in the country. There were people who 25 years ago were very thoughtful. People like Hildy Simmons, who was then at Morgan Bank,
okay.
who thought about the fact that we have to build the capacity of this sector. We have to make this sector strong enough to be able to deliver the services that we're going to expect it to deliver. So we have premier organizations, not just Jeff Canada, although he is brilliant at I was going to say Reedland, but at Harlem Children's Zone. And that program has been picked up enormously at the federal level, and they're looking to recreate promised neighborhoods all over the country. But we have, hundreds and hundreds of Jeff Canadas out there who have great programs, who do remarkable things, who make miracles happen. And the frustration right now is, having spent all of this time building this capacity, and right now there's more demand than we've ever seen for services because there's so many people in need, and the money isn't there for the nonprofit sector to be able to deliver. Now, it's frustrating if you see that there's a demand and you can't meet it, but it's more frustrating for me to say the demand is there and I know exactly who could meet it, but they don't have enough money to be able to meet the demand. So,
do you go to the government to try to say this?
I will say the mayor and particularly Deputy Mayor Gibbs have expressed a lot of interest in the nonprofit sector. They have come to realize, one of the big issues with the sector is efficiency, and they have come to realize that the transaction cost between a tiny little organization and the city of New York is just way too high.
Yeah.
So they are looking for ways.
What does that mean?
It means that whether you have, many nonprofit organizations would get, say, a member item from the city council, right?
Right, I wanted to talk about that.
So,
yes.
so that money, maybe that's $5,000 and it's going to a local daycare center. That daycare center, when you were in the city council, that daycare center director comes to you and says, Ronnie, we really need this money to do this. And you would say, this makes sense and it's good for my community. I'm going to approve it. But they don't have then a contract with their city council person. They have a contract with a city agency for which they are ill-prepared. They then have to deal with the bureaucracy. And so that's the kind of procurement mismatches that I think.
And also the delay in reimbursing, which
serious.
is terrible.
Right, serious.
So what is the lobbying effort on nonprofits? Who does that?
Well, Human Service Council, I think, does a fair amount of lobbying for nonprofits. And after that, it's, some nonprofits are politically savvy and hire lobbyists. I remember when Speaker Quinn was first speaker, she said, you're not going to need a lobbyist to talk to your government. And I think that's still true. Yeah. So, but a lot of people do, nonprofit leaders don't necessarily understand government or politics. So, you have to be able to figure out the system you're dealing in. And so some people have, they'll form around an issue, like I think AIDS service organizations have from time to time formed around an issue, or battered women, domestic violence, juvenile justice.
Well, you have
people.
to. I assume they all go into they're larger, they join another group of
but
cohorts.
The problem with that is that the nonprofit leader, who is also running a direct service organization for the most part, can't go to a million meetings.
Right.
So it's very time demanding.
Then when you have a program that that works, and there are regions other than your city or someplace or neighborhoods that could do the same thing, who does that process of selling? Anybody?
Well, it's the more entrepreneurial, like some of the settlements, I think, say settlement houses have traditionally been geographically based, but now they're looking around, say the settlement house in the Lower East Side. I think University Settlement is the first settlement and a good one to look at. And they are now they've just opened a youth center in Brooklyn, I think, in Brownsville. So I think that it's more opportunistic than it is systemic.
And do you think then these groups, like domestic violence, there are national conferences or regional conferences? Does the pollen, it's like pollen,
To some degree. I think that, one of the issues is that the sector's divided by issue, like domestic violence or at-risk youth, and And yet, when you're actually on the ground in a poor community, families don't show up and say, I have an at-risk youth here,
Right.
or, so mostly on the ground, people are doing more multi-service, but they might be funded to do just one thing. So that means that only a half of the time that they're working is actually covered by their revenue.
That's an interesting question. And the more they have to prove and submit the records, the more difficult it becomes.
The more it becomes. And also the demand of time to do the documentation is significant.
It's always, the papers always pick up on somebody who's done something wrong in a nonprofit.
Yes.
And then, the senators get up and they talk about pork. McCain and his pork. But we know that a lot of that pork is very useful.
That's right.
And the discretionary items that they attack in the state legislature and in the city. A lot of nonprofits, as you said before, they couldn't exist without those little dollars that come in.
No.
So how do we?
Well, I think we have to change. I was just talking to Speaker Quinn about this. I think that there's a moment here to change the perception of the nonprofit sector. There have been historically, a very tiny percentage of nonprofits that have not done the right thing for personal gain reasons. I think people have, maybe not done the right thing because they didn't know. Then somebody like us tells them, and then they stop doing it. So I think the idea of personal gain came in the case, of the member items at the city council. That came more from the council, and then it came from the nonprofits.
Right.
So, but I think we can look at that, but I suspect that we would do better as a city to look at the incredible contribution that the nonprofit sector makes to the city at large. It has to be more valued, not, as you were saying, thought of as less than a corporation, and it has to be also valued for the range of activities that the nonprofit sector delivers to the city every single day, with a fair amount of grace, with a fair amount of excellence, I guess I'd say. And so, it does feel like we're sort of looking at a tiny little piece instead of taking a broader look.
And we have to balance it also, because the reason the fire industries are so important is the revenue the city gets from them. And that's because they have higher salaries.
That's right.
The nonprofits are basically saving the city money in the long run.
Yes, and we pay taxes. I mean, we don't pay sales tax, but we pay real estate tax. We pay the new payroll tax,
and the employees pay their taxes.
Right, exactly.
Right.
So,
but the salaries are low.
Yeah, the salaries are lower.
So the city doesn't get the revenue. So somehow you have to show
the
that's contribution.
True. But I would argue that the salaries are lower, but
then you have to put a price on what the services are.
Well, yeah, but I think that I just think this, I can't prove it, that more nonprofit staff people live in the city than in the than the corporate. I mean, that money you're going to find nonprofit workers in the 5 boroughs.
I hope they can continue to live here, because the prices it's getting so expensive.
Well,
it's horrible.
That's probably another show.
So the other interesting thing that I wanted to talk about, your dinner partner, well, you could get a real job. It seems to me, from my own personal observations, the people who come from the private sector and think they can run in the public sector, the number of disasters is higher than the other way around.
Yeah. Well, there aren't too many nonprofit leaders who've gone on to run major corporations.
But wouldn't that be nice? It could be so great.
We
you would think that Ben and Jerry, for instance, must have been involved in a nonprofit. Maybe they were. I don't know.
Maybe we can have one of those role reversal days and trade off nonprofit leaders.
But that's true, isn't it?
Yeah, it's true that nonprofit leaders are tested more, forced every single day to sort of reach inside themselves and find the will to find a new answer or to move ahead. So I think that it goes more to the heart of you. I mean, never having run a corporation, I don't know.
And it's more respect for, the hierarchy, although it's there, but the respect for workers is higher.
Yeah,
There's,
a collegial,
a nonprofit isn't going to hire somebody at substandard wages.
not if they can avoid it. I mean,
Yeah.
some
mean,
of the contracts, require
Right.
that, but it's not something they would revel in or be glad of to be able to
Right.
keep costs down.
And-
Nonprofits have a kind of or have traditionally had a kind of social compact with their staff, which is the salaries aren't very good, the work environment is better, we will train you, and we will pay for benefits. Now, on that last point, we're beginning to fray because health insurance costs are so high. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's kind of hard for everybody right now.
You have a website that people can go to?
I do.
And small organizations, you charge a scale of fees from 0 to whatever.
Not really. I mean,
Oh.
we try. Well, first of all, what's important for folks to know is that they can get to us now through 311. The mayor's office set that up. So if you're a nonprofit leader and you're sort of sitting there and don't know what to do, you can call 311 and eventually you'll get linked to us. Also, you could approach us on our webpage. The way in which we try to get paid is through third-party payment arrangements. So we might have a contract with an agency or a contract with a private foundation. The New York Foundation has been in partnership with us for years.
In other
as
words,
has
they
the
could
New
get a
York Community
foundation grant
Trust.
sometime to pay for you.
Or we might have a
or you
grant
might-
that allows
that's
us
to see
work with them. So they should get in touch with us. We do the best we can to make something happen.
Yeah, that's great.
It's not our inclination to turn people
Well,
away.
so thank you very much. This is
Thank
the end
you,
of the
Ronnie.
hour.
Oh.
And I hope that people will go to the website
CRENYC.org. Yeah.
Thank you, Fran Barrett.
Thank you, Ronnie.
If there are any people you'd like to hear and topics you'd like us to explore, please let me know. You can write to me at CUNY TV, 365 Fifth Avenue, New York, New York, 10016, or you can go to the website at cuny.tv and click on Contact Us. I look forward to hearing from you.